Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Politics and Prose. My name is Grant. I'm a bookseller here at the Connecticut Avenue location, where we host in-person events along with partnered and supported events, trips, and classes. We've recently relocated our branches at Union Market and the Wharf, and we've started hosting events there. For a full list of everything confirmed, please go to our website, politics-prose.com. Before we get started today, I'd like to ask you to please silence your cell phones so as not to disrupt the event. When we get time to open up the floor for questions, we have a mic over by the right pillar. Please speak clearly into the mic since this event is being live streamed tonight. After the Q&A, we'll be having a sign-in up here at this table. If you haven't done so already, you could purchase the books up at checkout, and then we'll form a line over at the right pillar for to be signed. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Ala Stanford to talk about her new book, Take Care of Them Like My Own. Dr. Stanford is a pediatric surgeon, founder of the Black Doctors Consortium and Real Concierge Medicine, a national leader in health equity, a healthcare policy advisor, and former regional director of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services of the Mid-Atlantic. Dr. Stanford gained international recognition during the COVID-19 pandemic using the infrastructure of her pediatric surgery practice to create a grassroots organization focused on education, testing, contact tracing, and vaccination in communities devoid of access to care and resources. She subsequently opened a multidisciplinary ambulatory care center in one of the lowest life expectancy neighborhoods in Philadelphia, where she continues to care for people. Dr. Stanford will be in conversation with Dr. Dana Williams, a professor of African American literature and dean of the graduate school at Howard University. Prior to serving as dean, she served as chair of English at Howard University for 9 years. She is president of the Modern Language Association and a past president of the College Language Association. She is co-executive director of the Georgetown Howard Center for Medical Humanities Health Justice. Please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose, Ala Stanford and Dana Williams.
Good evening. And good evening to the live stream. We're so excited to be here. I can't tell you how excited I am to talk to you about this book, which is launching tomorrow. So first, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a bit surreal to come into a place and see your face on a whole bunch of books when you walk in and be surrounded by faces I know and some that I don't know, and to talk about a very personal story to me.
I'd say get used to it. I've read the book from cover to cover, and you'll be doing a lot of press on this book. I'm convinced of it. And what we want to share with you tonight is some of the reasons why we think you'll be doing a lot of press. And we're excited to have you talk to us about it. I want to start, or just to give everybody a little bit of brief intro or sense of the book opens with a newborn that Dr. Stanford has operated on. But then it shifts a little bit to talk about another newborn. So I'll read just a little bit of it just to give you a sense of the prose and then have you jump in and tell us a little bit about it. I would try this without my readers, but it wouldn't be a good idea. We were just joking. I also had a jacket and I said I'm 50. And so those of you who are 50 know I don't have to say anything else. My husband says I'm 52. I'm 51, actually. It's New Year's Eve day. The 14-year-old, 9 months pregnant, is shopping downtown at Wanamaker's department store, a Philadelphia institution, looking for an outfit for her baby-to-be. It's mid-morning. The girl came from work and will soon be heading back to work. She feels a pain, hard enough to force her to hold on to the nearest wall. It's time. At a payphone, she calls one family member, then another, but can't reach anyone. It's the first year her extended family is celebrating Kwanzaa, and New Year's Day is the last day of the holiday. Everyone, including the father-to-be, is out busy shopping or unreachable at work. Moments later, she's outside, hoping a taxi will stop and take her to the hospital. One goes by, then another, and another. She doesn't want to get on the bus because it will take too long, so she does what she knows. In labor, She walks gingerly down the stairs to the Broad Street line at City Hall. She will have to take it almost to the end. Race, Vine, Spring Garden, Fairmont. Please, she prays, don't let my child be born. On the Broad Street subway. Erie, Hunting Park, Wyoming, almost there. She steps off at Olney and walks to the Einstein Hospital entrance where she's in labor, where they see she's in labor. She screams so much they sedate her. She is left in a room. When she wakes, she's no longer pregnant. She's lying in a bed, in a puddle of blood, with no memory of the delivery. There is no baby. She's 14 years old. After all, a very recent 14. She continues roaming until someone sees her and tells her the baby girl has been taken to the NICU. It's okay, though. It's okay. They just needed to do for the baby whatever they do. While the new mom, Carolyn is her name, was under. That baby was you. So tell us a little bit about your beginnings.
Well, my beginnings were a lot like my life, kind of unpredictable, but then everything was okay. Um, my mom was young but determined. Um, she did the best she could with what she had. I can't even imagine now. I have two 14-year-old twins, them being parents. And so she sacrificed her childhood for us. And some of the things that I talk about in the book that I wish I did not have to experience, I now am at peace with, but it took years, decades of healing. And I wanted to talk about that in the book because so many people get stuck with some of those experiences and they're never able to move past it. And when I started on this journey of writing a book, a journalist asked me once, Queen Muse, if she's out there from the Philadelphia Magazine, she said, "What would make you, in the middle of a pandemic, decide that you were going to run to danger when everyone else was running in the opposite direction?" And I said, "You'd have to know my story, how I got to be there in the first place with an opportunity to help others and save lives." And so, um, my my mom is my, she's my everything. She's the first person who believed in me. For everything I ever wanted to do, she never told me no. But even in her own shortcomings, again, that I'm at peace with now, but I definitely struggled with, but that adversity and those experiences, I think, allowed me to be more empathetic with my patients because the experience that I had, many of them had shared, and I could see things through their eyes because I too was them. Yeah.
How did you come to that piece? I think that's really important to talk about for people who will read the book and will want to get to that place of peace quickly. And it's not a fast process.
Well, the first thing is you have to recognize that you are broken in some places. You have to recognize that because our mind is beautiful and it will put painful experiences in another part so you don't have to think about them. But when you don't deal with it, certain things will happen that will trigger you and you'll be right back there. And that kept happening to me because I went to medical school, right? And so then you have to treat people who have had traumatic experiences. But now I haven't dealt with my own. And so I could have a stoic face and I could be caring with the person I was caring for, but then I would fall apart. So I first had to get there. I had to have painful conversations with my mother. painful. And this book has sort of brought it all back up. But fortunately, we had discussed some things. And I talk about something in the book, but I'm not going to tell you because you have to read it. But where, and I'll mention it, I was at a book event with Ayanla Von Sant. And I'm going to just leave it there. But when you talk about having that aha moment, that was one. Another was, remember when we used to watch Oprah back in the day? She had this episode on, and there were children talking about experiences, and it was the first time I saw other children talk about it, and I knew I wasn't the only one. I remember that clearly as a teenager. Then there was another experience, and I don't mind sharing this one, is when the Pope came to Philadelphia about 10 years ago. And he was doing, and I'm not Catholic, but I'll just say he was giving sermons, and we'll just say that. I know that's not what you call the Catholic Church, but he was delivering a message. And it translated from Italian to English, and what he said was, "I'm sorry that happened to you." And he said, "It wasn't your fault." And I think in all my years, I had never heard someone say that. So anyway.
And I know you talk a little bit in the book about part of your healing, and you mentioned it now, part of your healing was the healing work that you were doing.
Oh my goodness.
And a big part of wanting to be a doctor was, I want the opportunity to fix this and to protect.
Right. And I didn't know that. That all came together literally 10 years ago. So I can't even say I've known it my whole life. But of all things, my pastor asked me to give a sermon on Pentecost Sunday. Now, I'm not a preacher by any stretch, and it probably took me 4 months to write it, because I know how sacred that time is when you go to church and you're getting 15 minutes of someone's time where they have your undivided attention, and I wanted to say something meaningful. It really took me a long time to write it. And ultimately, I realized that the gift that I had been given from God was really to heal others, was really to heal myself. And it was like this full circle. Even becoming a pediatric surgeon, those were the sickest of the sickest of the sickest kids. So children who had been abused or in car accidents or had traumatic conditions that needed emergent surgery needed a pediatric surgeon. And so in those times, I was the parent, I was the caregiver, I was the protector, and I could maybe do in some ways the things that weren't done for me. And I could help the parents do better to care for their children. And every time, and people didn't have to say thank you. Like when I saw the children getting better, I knew that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. But it took, a whole bunch of things happening before it became clear to me. It was there all the time, but it took something happening, which I talk about in the book, that made it become clear that the gift God gave to me in healing was really his gift to heal me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit about how casually she talks about being a pediatric surgeon as if it's not the hardest thing to do. She's like, yeah, I wanted to be a pediatric surgeon because, I wanted to heal people. Well, that had a lot of extra steps and layers, and we'll talk about that in a second. But as you were talking about the preparation for speaking to people and giving the word, part of your commitment to doing that exceptionally well is because you had seen it. Mm-hmm. You knew what it was like having visited, I think it was your uncle who was a pastor, and watching him go into spaces for hours at a time with books and thinking, only to come out and be able to deliver a word. That wasn't something that you took lightly.
No.
So those experiences growing up around people who took the act of the spoken word very seriously, and then similarly, really being around people who had participated informally and indirectly in critical moments in Black history. So you talk about your mother and your grandmother being in the Audubon Ballroom when Malcolm X is killed, and some of the spaces that you found yourselves in that were definitively African, particularly the free African schools. So you had that benefit of solid Black institutions and people who gave you some glimpse into what was possible. You want to talk a little bit about your background there?
So I went to a school called Nathamu Sasa in Philadelphia, and it means discipline now. And it's in Germantown, which is not a fancy part of the city, but all of the teachers there were Black, and they were also my extended family. And so my name is Ayla, which means Princess of Earthly Things, and it's West African. And all of my friends had African names. Like that was just, I mean, we didn't know any different. What I learned there, two things I can definitely, was a proud sense of self. And so on the walls were all these history. Of course, there was Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, but then there were kings and queens and the pyramids from Egypt and all these things that talked about from whence we had come, other than slavery, which is what, most people knew. And so we knew that history. So the things we could possibly become, we saw at a very early age. So there was no thought that I couldn't become something. That was number one. The other thing we learned was conflict resolution. And I'm going to give you, for example, if you were talking smack about somebody or you were fighting or whatever, and the teachers got wind of it, you got a string tied around your wrist and a string tied around the other person's wrist, and you all were tied together all day long. All day long. And sometimes it went on for more than a day until you worked it out. So it meant that if you had to go to the bathroom, the other person was standing outside the stall like this. You had to do everything: nap time, lunchtime, recess. So even though you wanted to run and not be with them, you weren't allowed to do it. And in that time, you worked it out. And so I think that is something that is really missing, where everyone wants a quick fix. You hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you back immediately. There's no time to talk about why, we say hurt people. I mean, that was part of it. And so those were two lessons. Those folks are all my friends that I grew up with. They're in education and medicine and all sorts of things. And, oh my goodness. And when I went to public school, and there were like kids calling kids the N-word, like that was completely foreign to me. Like we never used those words. My teachers wanted to call me Anna because it was more appropriate and it was easier to pronounce, and that's what a girl should be called, not this name that someone gave. So there were all these things that, because my foundation was strong, even though sometimes I got pushed, I had a strong sense of self because that was instilled in me at a very early age. And we didn't have, my mom, she hadn't even graduated from high school yet. So we didn't have a lot of money, or we didn't have a car, we didn't have, anything. Sometimes we didn't have heat, right? So, but that type of stuff doesn't cost anything. You know what I mean? That is that sense of self. And that's what I got from that school. It's harder to do that now. I try with my children, and I'm, doing the best, me and Dad, as we can, but it's harder. But that's something I will treasure forever.
Yeah, because it's also somewhat inconvenient, because the teacher or the parent has to endure while you're working it out. And we just rather say, you go that way, just separate.
Right.
Just end this already. Right. So the fact that it did require this discipline of everybody, and it fostered this sense of community that then kicks back in when you're in college is really important. It never leaves, even as there are some interesting things you did as a kid. Yeah.
Yep.
Like
Well, which
Use
one?
a magnifying glass to set stuff on
okay,
fire.
okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't ask, but sometimes people do.
Yeah.
Why did I want to be a doctor? So I love science, and I found out early once I got to public school that if you were smart, people paid attention to you because there were really no expectations for what you might do or what you might become. But when you started getting A's, the teachers were paying attention. And in Philly, and maybe even in DC, they had MG or AT classes, which were mentally gifted or academically talented. And what that meant was one day a week, you got to go somewhere else. So for me, it meant I got a pack of tokens, which was like gold, that I could go from my neighborhood to another part of Philly, which was like a whole new world, to be on Drexel's campus or Penn's campus, right? And when I was there, I was exposed to lots of things, and some of the things were field trips. And you know, I didn't have money at the gift shop, but I got stuff. And so I, I had the magnifying glass, and I knew I had read, or maybe I just realized that things got hot when it was in my hand, and I thought, well, maybe I can make a fire. And I did. And then, of course, all these leaves are on fire, and the chief, Ayla, what are you doing? What are you doing? Now, of course, I got in trouble, but I was fascinated by it. I was just fascinated, the formaldehyde and the frogs and all this stuff. Everybody didn't get to do that. Only the smart kids got to do that, right? And the more I was intrigued by that, the more things I got to do. So that's one. The other one, and I talked about this in the story mainly because we sometimes, or I should say society, no one in this room, sort of cast their eyes down on children when they get caught doing stuff, stealing stuff or acting out in school or whatever. And I remember one time, my brother and I, who's 5 years younger than me, in my heart, decided we were hungry and we wanted something to eat. So we went to the grocery store. This is so crazy, such a bad plan. But, and I'm 9 and he's 4. And I decided we were going to get some tasty cakes. If y'all from Philly, you had some tasty cakes. And that somehow I was going to walk out the grocery store and no one was going to see. Well, when your 4-year-old is your lookout, things could go very bad, But what happened is, and I'd like to think that this doesn't happen anymore, but it probably still happens somewhere. But I was arrested, 9 years old, and I had handcuffs put on behind my back and put in a paddy wagon with no windows, and you're driving around. You have no sense because you can't see anything, and you're just going over all these bumps and you're sliding all over. And they took me to a police station. It's interesting. I drove by there today on my way to the train to come here. It still hits, like I still remember being 9 and sitting in that cell waiting for my mother to come to pick me up. And I think about the energy it may have taken to walk me through the grocery store, embarrassed in front of people, put me in a paddy, like all that time it took to then call my mom, wait for her to get off work to pick me up, taking all these buses because we didn't have a car to come get me. Like, what if someone, I don't know, had sat me down and, I don't know, showed me an encyclopedia or like told me about a Boys and Girls Club or something.
Or even made you work off the 35 cents that it cost for the tasty cake, right?
Yeah.
Some lesson that could have been useful as opposed to we're just going to end this because it doesn't deserve anything else.
And I think about, and now that you bring this up, I think when I have one of these in front of my brother, I think it's going to be really hard for me. Because in my mind, I'm picturing he had to walk home by himself. Mm-hmm. So again, I share it because we always so often cast our eyes down on the kids when they're doing stuff. Like sometimes, you know, if a kid is stealing something, it's because they are trying to get something else. Like, especially if they take 5 of something. What are they going to do with 5 of something, right? They're probably going to sell it so that they can get some money. Usually it's to eat. Sometimes it's to give to their parents. You don't know why. And so I guess that rather than it being criminalized is to maybe ask them what they need.
Yeah.
So,
and that kind of challenge of not having a complete village in place once you're in med school. And we're going to skip ahead. You go to college, you do well, you do some really great things, you go to med school, and you have some support network, but not complete support network, some things that you have to overcome, which makes it clear why in 2024 we can say we know and are sitting and talking to the first Black woman who's a pediatric surgeon trained in the US. Like the idea of that, that's a clap, yes. Yes. But the idea that she's still here and walking and living and we're not reading about her in a history book means that it's incredibly hard, and some people make it harder.
Some people make it harder. I mean, so it's kind of like, I guess the best example I could give, because it doesn't hurt my heart to tell the story. When I was in Pittsburgh, I was doing my general surgery training, and there's a VA hospital. So you come in and you're the doctor or you're the resident, and the veteran is saying, well, I'm waiting for the doctor to get here, you know? And I said, well, I'm here, you know, or no, you first start and he's like, oh, the trash is over there. And I say, well, I'm not here to get the trash. Oh, you bringing me something to eat? No, I don't have your food. Are you coming to draw my blood? No, I'm not coming to draw the blood. Well, I'm waiting for, well, I am the doctor. Where? Right here. See, it's on my badge. And when I was younger, I used to get upset with that. When I got older, I realized that people know what they know. So if they've never seen a woman doctor, if they've never seen a Black doctor or a Black woman doctor, and you walk in, you're not what they expect to see. That's not their fault. It's just we are all products of our lived experience. So at first, it's a little uncomfortable because you're not happy to see me and I'm not happy to see you, but you're who I got and I'm who you got, and we got to figure it out. And I think those experiences were okay because most times the patients were okay. That same thing, but the difference with the patients is they needed you. Okay. When it's your instructor and it's already, surgery is already male dominated. Well, some of that's changing, but surgery is already male dominated. And so then you're a woman, okay, but now you're a Black woman and you're trying to do pediatric surgery. When I trained, there were only 25 spots per year to become a pediatric surgeon. Now there's about 50 spots per year.
And not at a hospital.
No, not at the hospital.
Total.
Across the United States. And so you had to be like the cream of the cream of the cream of the crop to get into that. And once you got in, some people were happy for you, some people were not. And then they just made it that much more challenging. Like every day you went to work. And I used to recite Psalm 91 as I walked into the hospital, like every day. I used to say to myself, you can't stop the clock. Can't stop the clock. The sun's going to come up, the sun's going to go down, and that's how I'm going to get through this day, you know? And so just, there's so many experiences. Let's see. I don't know which one. Which one should I talk about?
I think the one that struck me the most was when you were prepared with 3 wonderful letters of recommendation, only to get one letter of recommendation that was completely false and completely provable as false.
Yes.
To try to stop you because you had crossed all of the other hurdles.
I had graduated. I had taken my boards. I was board certified as an adult general surgeon. I'm now board eligible, ready to take my pediatric surgery boards. I've graduated. I'm done. I've done all my requirements, and now I need to get my license in the state. So I go and I'm sitting across from the license administrator, and he's going through all of my records, and he's like, oh, all these letters are glowing except for this one from your program director, who says that you were on probation, that you had to go before the Graduate Medical Education Board, that you required remediation, and that he would not recommend that you be advanced. Now I'm like done. I have like a week that I'm just showing up just because. And the person sitting across the desk from me was a Black man who was about to be shipped off to Iraq the next day. And he said to me, I see this happen all the time. There are these letters in people's files. People never know why they didn't get the job. He ripped it out. He gave it to me and said, when you get back to your university, show this to your GME office and tell them what happened. The next day, he was gone. He was gone. And I thought to myself, and I was going to reschedule that so many different times. And I thought, what if I didn't get him? Mm-hmm. I went back to my GME office. And of course, the head of the committee knew that I never sat before him. You know what I mean? He knew that I was never on, because I would have had to go through him. There would have been a whole process, but it never happened. It was just a lie. And it was April, and we graduated in June. And he said, well, what do you want me to do? And I said, oh, and I forgot to tell you, I had a job lined up and all these things. We had put our savings, which was a lot of money back then, down on a house. My husband had quit his job. We were all ready to go. And all of that was taken away because this person called the hospital and said all those things, all of it. So now, after 18 years of training, after high school, because I graduated at 17, so I'm now 35, and I've done all this training, and I have no job. And so the officer said, what do you want? I said, I don't want you to say anything. I just want to get out of here. I just want to go and get out of here. But it was, the culmination event at your graduation where it should be joyous and everyone should be happy and, all these presentations. And it was just somber because everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew. Usually you announce our graduating fellow is going to X program to start their training and yada, yada, yada. There was none of that for me because I didn't have a job, And you want to talk about having to rebuild your self-esteem and feeling like, well, damn, was I good enough? Wasn't I good enough? I can't get a job. And then everybody, because there's only like 1,300 pediatric surgeons in the United States, everybody knew. Everybody knew what had happened. So I had to go through all of that. But that's just one example. That happens all the time. And so when there's attrition rates with people of color, Black doctors represent 4.7% of doctors in the United States. It was that 20 years ago. It's still that now. It's because of stories like this one that I tell in the book that no one ever talks about because they're afraid that, they won't get hired or they'll be, sort of targeted, have a scarlet, whatever, and no one will hire them. Well, since I work for myself now,
you can tell.
And the University of Pennsylvania hired me knowing all of this about me, it's a beautiful place to be. But how many hurdles I had to clear to get to that point. So I talk about all that in the book. All the names have been changed. No. I went through the legal read with Simon & Schuster, so it's all good. But, and the people who were part of it, they all know. And for what it's worth, every hospital that I had an unpleasant whatever, and this is not in the book, have all invited me back to be guest lecturers, to be an invited professorship, to teach faculty, to mentor the students. And every chair has said to me, we should have done better by you. They have all said it to me. And so it's a beautiful, and I made sure they all had copies of the book before it came out. I was like, listen, I'm letting you know this is going to be out. I made sure they all had copies. But when there aren't as many doctors, it's not that Black folks aren't smart enough. It's not that at all. And I just, again, using my story as an example, just one example, but there are lots of ALAs out here that have similar stories. Some that never finished school because of this, or became a doctor, or worse yet, went to medical school, became a doctor, and then was not allowed to get the credentials you need to actually take care of patients because of, like, if that had happened, if that man wasn't there, I would have never gotten my license to practice medicine. And without a license, it doesn't matter how much training you've done, right? So that's just one, but I talk about lots of them in there.
And we didn't do this on purpose, but it works out, all things in divine order. We're at the time where we're going to open the floor for questions, and we haven't even talked about the COVID part of the book, which is really important because what makes the book so rich and so good is you don't understand how she was willing to go into some serious debt after all of that training and not do surgery, but to say people in my community who are dying at faster rates than anybody else are being turned away from hospitals because they don't have insurance. They don't have a referral from their doctor. People are being turned away from testing sites that are drive-through that are supposedly open for everybody because they don't have a car. Like if you had a car, you could drive to a hospital and get a test. But if you're walking up because it's 2 miles away, or you took the bus to the spot because you are a public worker and you need a test because someone in your family is positive or has died, or you are symptomatic, rather than have public safety at the forefront, it's like, you don't have a car, and not have the critical thinking skills or the will to say, we will do this anyway. So you walk away from all that. All of that is what informs a person who says, if LabCorp will not underwrite this, charge them to my account and we'll figure the rest out later.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. Because they said, who's going to pay for it? And I said, well, I'm a doc in good standing. I have an account with you, and I need you to bill me. And they were like, okay, okay. I mean, because I was a doc in good standing, and those $100,000 bills started coming in and so forth. But then the CARES Act was passed, which allowed you to bill for the uninsured and underinsured patients that everyone else had been turning away. That I was saying, I don't care whether you have insurance or not, just come to me. So I was able to submit those claims, and now something that would have put me in debt was now revenue generating. And so I took that money that I earned and reinvested it to build an ambulatory care center in a community with the lowest life expectancy in Philadelphia, so that people can get expert care by walking somewhere or getting a bus, or we're across the street from a high school. We are an annex to a church. We are across from HUD housing. And where I live in the suburbs, there is a ambulatory care center for Jefferson, for University of Pennsylvania, for Children's Hospital Philadelphia that I could ride my bike to. All of them. I don't even have to go into the city anymore. But in the city, in communities that are impoverished, you can find a clinic, maybe, but you can't find that expert care where people live. And that's what I wanted to create. And so I took the money that I wasn't expecting. My husband, who is, a financial planner and CPA, was like, "You doing what?" I didn't say any of what I was doing till after I had done it. And so because I wasn't expecting to make money. I didn't go into it to make money in the first place. And so I went back and I reinvested it. And now my goal is to make it an endowment and make more, and hopefully to get some universities to put those in those impoverished communities, because they deserve to have it too. Expert care where they live and work and play.
Yeah. Thank you. So we do have time for some questions, and the microphone is here to get as many questions as we can. We invite you to ask your questions succinctly, and we will go just in the order of people who are lined up.
Truth in advertising, the moderator is my wife. And the first thing I want to say is, Dr. Aylen, when you mentioned being tied together with string to the children, there are three of us, and when we would disagree, my mother would put us in a room and force us to hug one another until we. So what I wanted to ask is, I think that that is an ancestral wisdom in us. What other things did you learn in that cultural milieu of that school that carry you, that defy this Western culture of dominance and punishment, especially of the other who is already made less than human? What did you learn that we can learn together to be real community?
So, thank you for the question. I would say the respect of elders was paramount. Oh my goodness. There was definitely no cursing. There was carrying bags for. We enjoyed being around the elders. Like, we wanted to sit at their feet and learn things from them. And so I feel like that's something I try to instill in my children, and still when the elders in my sorority or in my church or whichever ask me to do something, it's just yes, okay, what time? No matter how many times they explain it over and over and over and over, whatever you say, it's so I would say that was definitely one, the sort of reaching back to pull up, and he's not heavy, he's my brother. All of that is just real to me. Just yeah, just if you see somebody and your eyes meet, the saying how you doing, sometimes when they're looking down saying how you doing anyway, so they look up and acknowledge that I see you. Certainly when you're in spaces when there's not that many of you, just making that eye contact, like, and not everybody was raised that way, but it doesn't mean I don't try anyway. It doesn't mean I don't try anyway. But especially the respect of the elders, the conflict resolution, you look out for your brother. I have 3 boys, and I tell them all the time, if your friend is talking about your brother, then that's not your friend. We go through it all the time. And so, yeah.
How much of that do you think informs the way that you tell the story? And here, what I'm thinking about very especially is you managed to tell a difficult story of an imperfect childhood, an imperfect young adulthood, an imperfect adulthood, because you're very clear that she wasn't always the person who said, don't say anything, I just want to get out of here. There's one time when you get in somebody's face and you like go at it. So part of what I'm saying here is you tell that story with such grace and humility and full depth of humanity. It's a really difficult balance to strike, to keep from doing pathology, to keep from doing like I'm the hero of this story, to keep from like to strike that balance that says this is the community that invested in me, and I'm going to reinvest in that community. I'm not going to take all my money and go into private practice. And we can talk a little bit about the opportunities that have made it possible for you to say, I don't have to do any of this anymore. I could just do concierge medicine for rich people and chill. But to say, no, I'm going to reinvest in the people and spaces who invested in me. And then we'll take your question. Yeah.
Because someone did that for me. And when I see children, and for that matter, young adults and grown folks, I see so much potential. Like, I see it. Sometimes in the question they ask, sometimes a glance, sometimes just saying, you look beautiful today to someone. You see their whole face light up, right? It's why, even though everyone's trying to do telehealth medicine for everything, especially mental health, and I get it, sometimes it works, but that human touch is so important. Like, you might be that only person that someone sees all day that says, how are you doing? Tell me about your day. How are you feeling? And so often when you're the one taking care of everyone, nobody asks you. I make sure I ask my pastor that every time I see him, because he takes care of everybody, asking them how they're doing, that before I start talking about my stuff, I mentally make a note to ask him how he's doing every time. And so, John, I can't even remember the question you asked me.
Well, I'm really thinking about like how it is that you're able to.
Yes.
And let me
The
add
humble,
one other quick thing to it.
I know.
Because it would have been easy for you to say, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Everybody else should be able to. That's a kind of Western Republican, just everybody, like you don't have to have everything, but you make lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
Something kept you from that.
Because everything that I have had in my life is by the grace of God. Just if one person wasn't there one day, if I hadn't gotten to the hospital at the time that I did, I wouldn't be here. And I don't take any of that for granted. The fact that one girlfriend liked a boy, I liked a boy, but when she got with the boy, she got pregnant and I didn't, that changed her life. But it doesn't mean it couldn't have happened to me. And then I wouldn't have been going to college at 17. And they had to stay home and take care of a baby. So I guess I just know that I'm like, I don't want to say 1 foot away or 2 steps away, but it doesn't take much for you to, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't rugged individualism that made you be, you couldn't just like decide and will yourself into, I'm going to do different and be different and have a different life.
People sacrifice so much for me. People that I don't even know sacrifice for me. So there's no way that I can leave this earth without passing the baton to the next generation. I feel like I'm responsible for making 10, 20, 100 of me's that outdo everything that I've done. And yeah, that's how.
That's beautiful. Yes.
Well, you just got it. Some of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and I wanted to congratulate you on your triumphs and successes that brought you here today, and I just think it's outrageous that you were the first. There should have been many, many before you. In your view, what were some of the special problems that you had with dealing with COVID in urban Philadelphia that, on top of what we all had to deal with, the public health, and then this insane resistance that some of which just comes out of decades-old right-wing, even Nazi propaganda about conspiracies and stuff. What were the?
Oh, I thank you for the question. Okay. First of all, it's a public health crisis, okay? In a public health crisis, you go to the most vulnerable, those who need a safety net where there's more disease and more death and more transmission of disease, particularly when it's communicable and transmissible, right? And so we knew that in congested communities where people couldn't be on an acre of land in their backyard and where there were multi-generational households of a newborn baby and a great grandma in the same space, that they couldn't isolate when someone was sick, that the same recommendations that were given to shelter in place, to go buy groceries for a month at a time, to work from home, and all these things it wasn't something you could do, right? And so there were recommendations that were not applicable to everyone in the population, number one. And that is something that systemically came down that hurt people because you told them what to do, but they couldn't do it, right? Get your COVID test, stay home for 5 days, and wait for your results to come back. And so what would happen is people would come get their test on their way to work and go to work knowing that they could have been positive, right? Mm-hmm. Or some people saying, I don't want to test because what's going to happen if I'm positive? I got to
Yeah.
pay my bills, right? So that was one thing, that the recommendations were not applicable to all populations. The other is that there was inertia until there was funding from the federal government that went to the state and went to the city. No one did anything. No one did anything. They just kind of sat around. And all of our federal places, people were working from home, which meant you couldn't go to a FQHC and get your care because they were all closed. The city health departments, which are also FQHCs, a lot of them, they were closed. The hospitals were overrun, and they were saying, until you get super, super sick, don't come. So all of that in the beginning really hurt communities that didn't have access. And then one other thing that happened, which was unique, is because there was this subjective narrative that Black Americans did not trust and want the vaccine, I had to fight to get it. And so in the city of Philadelphia, when I said to the health commissioner, and by now we're working together because we realize we need each other, I said, okay, the vaccine's available January 2021. We're ready. I mean, we've got a well-oiled system. We're ready to go. And he says, I can't give it to you because we can't afford to waste it, because back then it had the thaw, minus 90 degrees and yada, yada, and all of that. And he was like, I can't give it to you because people might not come. And if they don't come, there are other people who really want it. I was like, what? That's not true. So what I did, being a physician scientist, is I introduced a psychometric tool or a survey. So when people were coming in to get their flu shot or COVID test, I asked them about their perceptions and attitudes related to, and then I had the data to show. That was not enough either. He said, well, I don't know that you're ready. We're going to wait till mid-February. In the interim, my city, who I love, gave the contract to a group of non-medical, non-experienced, 20-something-year-old white boys. I'm going to say boys because they were. And for whatever reason, the health commissioner identified more in the health department with that organization and gave them $1 million contract to do mass vaccinations in the city of Philadelphia. Meanwhile, we had been doing the work. Everybody licensed, everyone, everything. It was only after it was uncovered that they were taking vaccine home, that they were wasting it, that they were doing all this other stuff, that they had to be shut down. It was on the Washington Post, it was New York Times, it was national news. Once they shut them down, they had no one to rely on but us, because we were the only ones that could manage 1,000+ people a day. And so we became the choice by default. We were not the first choice. And I bring that up because this is 2021, 2022, right? This isn't 1920. And so those things still happen as an example of unconscious or conscious bias or whatever. And to say, even when everyone is licensed, even when there's been no untoward activity, and your evidence, your work is right here, clear as day, still it was given to someone else, right? And so those were some of the unique challenges, but I'm grateful for the media because they put it all out there. They were truly our friend in how we got the recognition, but this book allows us never to forget that and prayerfully not repeat it. So those are the unique ones.
Thank you. I think before we wrap, where you will begin to sign books, if you can talk to us a little bit about Real Concierge, how it really emerges, and what we can do to try to approximate that if we aren't fortunate enough to all be able to call Dr. Ayla and say, do you think I should fill in the blank?
Right. Most people may or may not, well, y'all might know in DC, but the president has their own doctor. And that doctor's job is only to look after, that's his only patient. Most presidents live to be 90-something years old, right?
Jimmy Carter says he's going to stay alive to vote for Kamala for the reason,
right.
for the record. Yeah.
So, and they live,
I mean, Kamala, my bad.
And George Bush Sr. was jumping out of skydiving at like 80-something years old, right? And it's because that person's job is to look at you every day. You look so familiar to me. but I don't know you. Are you a doctor? No? No? You look so familiar to me. Okay, anyway. You are? Doctor. What's your last name? You look very familiar to me. Anyway, we're going to get back to that. Yeah. Harlem. Okay. In any case, so, oh my gosh, Dana.
Real concierge.
Thank you. So in any case, right. So they have one person who is responsible for caring for them. And so if you sneeze different, if you breathe different, it's their job to be right on top of it. So people with means, and not just celebrity folks, but folks who are high net worth individuals, are now hiring people to be that person for me, for you to vet the best breast surgeon that there is, the best endocrinologist, the best whatever, so that my family and I get the best care that money can buy. And you think that because you have money that you will get the best care. And that is not true, especially for Black folks. And I'm gonna give you an example. Let's just pick somebody I don't take care of. Let's say I'm looking at LeBron James. Let's say it's LeBron James. Okay. Well, no, because people know his family. We'll pick someone. Okay, so let's say LeBron James. Now, of course, you see LeBron James, everybody knows who that is. But if you see LeBron James' cousin, he looks like every other Black person. I mean, let's just call, what it is, right? So when he goes to the doctor, someone may, and this is not my own opinion, but the Institutes of Medicine have shown that doctors, often not of the same hue as a Black patient, do not take the time to explain choice A, B, C, D, and E. Not all the experimental options that might be available, because sometimes they don't think that A, you understand it, or B, you can afford it, or it's worth their time, right? And this is, again, has been documented 20 years ago and 2 days ago, okay? And so folks are saying, okay, my cousin needs help in Arizona. Can you find the best doctor? And so that's where I came into play. And it was something completely random where someone needed a physical and asked me to do it. And I said, sure, I could set you up with the best doctor to do that for you. And then I sent them a bill, and that was that. I was like, oh, that was kind of fun. But then he started telling a friend and telling a friend and telling a friend, if you have anything that's wrong, you need to call Dr. Ayla. That's how it happened. The REAL stands for Robeson, Ellison, Ayla, and Langston. Those are my children, my 3 sons. So that's REAL Concierge Medicine. It's been 12 years now. Some people, I am the doctor for their entire family. Some, it might just be, I have a new diagnosis of X, and I need the best surgeon in Wyoming to take care of me. So can you vet that? Sometimes I say the best person for this surgeon, this operation is not in Wyoming. They're actually in Massachusetts. So you need to bring everything and get them there. Sometimes there's no cure for what the person might have, but they still want to travel. So they need all the support. They literally need a rolling ICU so that they can get everything they need. And I coordinate all that. And so I have, staff of folks. I have multiple licenses in different states because, I don't play. I make sure if I'm taking care of you in X state, I have to be licensed in that state. And that was 12 years ago that started. And just an opportunity that allowed me, as I built my private practice, to have another revenue stream. So if there's any young people out here, you need multiple revenue streams. And so I was fortunate to have that. And then great experiences. When Will Smith jumped out of a helicopter for his 50th birthday in the Grand Canyon, he wanted to do that, but it was in the middle of a desert. And so I had to build a triage hospital in Arizona with, making sure we had running water and electricity. And if someone got bit by a snake, where was the closest place? Did we have the venom? Was it stored at the proper temperature? All these things I had to manage for that different terrain. And I also did mission work in Haiti, where we had nothing, where we had to bring all the resources. And when you put that together and then you have a pandemic, and it's like, well, how can you build a hospital in a parking lot? I was like, oh, I got it. Yeah. People are like, really? You do? I was like, yes, I got it. And fortunately, they followed me. And as they say, the rest is history.
Yes. Well, we want to say thank you for the book and for the work that you do, because one of the things she didn't get to tell you is as much as she does concierge medicine for people who have money, part of the money allows her also to hire staff for a person who comes into the ALA Center and says, here are these 12 medications by these 12 different doctors, none of whom are talking to each other. Does this make sense? And so you're able to tell a person who walks in off of the street, don't do this with this and this, or let's have this conversation to bring all of your doctors together. So thank you for all of the work that you do and for this really important book. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford and Dr. Williams. Please be sure to find the book at the